In the early hours of an autumn morning, Athens woke to the sight of weary but defiant passengers stepping off a flight from Tel Aviv. They were members of the global Sumud World Flotilla, a civilian mission that had set sail in late September with a simple but dangerous goal: to deliver humanitarian aid to the besieged people of Gaza. Among them was Yasemin Acar, a Turkish activist whose testimony about what happened on that journey has since echoed far beyond Greece. Akar's voice trembled but remained steady as she faced a circle of microphones at the Athens airport. Her words offered a first-hand account of the perilous voyage and the treatment the activists say they endured after being intercepted by Israeli forces. For her, the mission was never about politics. It was about food, medicine and water filters for a population that, according to United Nations agencies, is facing severe hunger and worsening deprivation after years of conflict and blockade. The flotilla's journey began peacefully with volunteers, medics and campaigners from several countries sailing on small vessels through the Mediterranean, flying banners calling for the lifting of what they describe as an unlawful siege. Their hope was to reach Gaza's coastline and hand over basic relief supplies. But as the flotilla drew closer to its destination, the tension that had shadowed their voyage turned into confrontation. According to Acar, the confrontation came not in Gaza's waters, but far out at sea. She recalls, in her own words, "First, I was on board the Madeleine and we were attacked again and intercepted in international waters 90 nautical miles from Gaza, where Israel has no jurisdiction. They arrested us and held us hostage for 20 hours, handcuffed. Then they forcibly took us to Israel and imprisoned us." Her statement highlights a critical point of dispute. While Israel enforces a naval blockade of Gaza, the flotilla's supporters insist the interception took place in international waters, outside Israel's legal reach. The Israeli military argues that the blockade is a matter of national security, necessary to prevent weapons from reaching militant groups in Gaza. Yet for activists like Acar, the action amounted to an illegal abduction of civilians whose cargo consisted of nothing more than aid. After the vessels were seized, the passengers were transported to Israeli territory. It was there, Acar says, that the ordeal worsened. She told reporters, "Upon our arrival, the treatment. We were treated like animals, like terrorists, even though our mission was non-violent. We were not carrying weapons. We only had humanitarian aid to bring to Gaza, to a population starved by Israel and its allies. We were then imprisoned for 6 days in conditions we had no rights. The conditions were really, really bad, and we were tortured." Israeli officials deny allegations of torture, describing the detentions as lawful and necessary for security. However, human rights advocates have urged independent investigations, warning that the treatment of detainees, particularly in the first hours of capture, must meet international legal standards. Akar's description of her detention paints a stark picture. She recounted, "We were physically assaulted, we were deprived of sleep, we couldn't sleep. We didn't have any clean water. For the first 48 hours, we didn't receive any food or water. We were locked in small cells inside buses for very long hours. They turned off the air conditioning and prevented us from using the bathrooms. They isolated us, then beat us again and threatened to gas us." Her testimony, echoed by other activists from the flotilla, suggests that the experience went far beyond routine detention. Rights groups in Athens and Ankara say these accounts raise serious concerns about violations of the Geneva Conventions governing the treatment of civilians in conflict situations.
First and foremost, I was on the Madeleine, and again we were arrested. We were attacked and intercepted in international waters, 90 nautical miles from Gaza. So Israel has no jurisdiction there. And they arrested us. They kept us 20 hours hostage and in handcuffs, and then they brought us against our will to Israel and then imprisoned us. When we arrived, the treatment, we were treated like animals, we were treated like terrorists, and we are a non-violent mission. We carry no weapons. We only had humanitarian aid, which we were supposed to bring to Gaza, to a population that is being starved by Israel and by its allies. And then we were imprisoned for 6 days, and the conditions, we had no rights. The conditions were really, really bad, and we were tortured.
The ordeal, as described by Acar, was not limited to harsh confinement. She claims the detainees were subjected to public humiliation and psychological pressure. She told journalists, "We were kept under the sun, our hands were cuffed to the back, and we were put to the ground with our heads down, knelt down." Then Ben-Gvir came and told us that we are terrorists, held a speech. We were forced to watch documentaries. They tried to brainwash us. There were many things, the references to Itamar Ben-Gvir, Israel's national security minister and a far-right political figure known for his uncompromising stance on Gaza. Israeli authorities have not commented on the claim that he addressed the detainees directly, nor on the allegations of forced ideological re-education. The image painted by Acar nonetheless resonates with long-standing criticism of Israel's policies toward political dissenters and humanitarian actors. In addition to the alleged abuse, the activists describe legal proceedings that they say violated their basic rights. Acar explained, "We were not allowed to see our lawyers. We were brought before a judge without a lawyer who told us that we had entered Israel illegally, which we refused to accept because it is not true. We were going to Palestine, where Israel has imposed a siege for 18 years, and we were supposed to break this siege because it is against international law. Israel is committing genocide. Israel is using starvation as a weapon of war." The accusation of genocide is among the most serious levelled against Israel in recent years, one that Israeli leaders firmly reject. Legal scholars note that while the word carries immense political weight, its use in international law is narrowly defined and requires clear evidence of intent to destroy a population in whole or in part. Still, Akar's words underscore the desperation and anger felt by activists who see the blockade as collective punishment. Acar concluded her testimony with a reminder that what she experienced was, in her view, only a glimpse of the reality faced by Palestinians inside Gaza. As she put it, "And we saw just a fraction of what Palestinians go through and the 11,000 prisoners go through, 500 of them children as young as 9 years old." That reference draws attention to the wider humanitarian context, the plight of thousands of Palestinian detainees held in Israeli prisons, some facing military courts, others in administrative detention without trial. Human rights organisations have repeatedly called for fair trials and better conditions for prisoners, particularly minors. The story of the Sumud Flotilla recalls an earlier and deadly chapter in this saga. In May 2010, the world watched in shock as Israeli commandos stormed the Mavi Marmara, a Turkish-flagged ship carrying activists and aid toward Gaza. 9 passengers were killed in the raid, leading to a prolonged rift between Israel and Turkey and to international condemnation. 15 years later, flotillas still sail and the underlying dispute remains unresolved. Israel views the blockade as essential for its security, while critics call it an illegal siege that deepens Gaza's humanitarian crisis.
We were physically assaulted. We were deprived of sleep. We could not sleep. We didn't have any clean water. The first 48 hours, there was no food, no water at all. We were kept in small cells on buses for many, many hours. They turned off the AC. They didn't let people use the bathrooms. They isolated us, and then again we were beaten. We were threatened to be gassed. We were kept under the sun. Our hands were cuffed to the back, and we were put to the ground with our heads kneeled down. And then Ben-Gvir came and told us that we are terrorists. Held a speech. We were forced to watch documentaries. They tried to brainwash us. There were many things.
In Athens, the return of the latest flotilla's members was met with cheers and tears. Supporters gathered at the airport and at the city's port, waving Palestinian flags and chanting slogans for freedom and human rights. Local human rights organisations urged the European Union to demand an impartial investigation into the activists' allegations. For them, the incident is not just about a single confrontation at sea, but part of a broader pattern of responses to humanitarian efforts for Gaza. International reaction has been mixed but concerned. The United Nations Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs has renewed its call for unhindered delivery of aid to Gaza's civilian population. Governments in Ankara and several European capitals have demanded explanations for the flotilla's treatment and access for independent observers. Israeli authorities maintain that any vessel approaching Gaza without coordination risks aiding armed groups and will be stopped. The political debate continues, but for the activists who endured the journey, the detention, and what they describe as mistreatment, the experience is deeply personal. Their accounts offer a window into the clash between humanitarian aspirations and security policies, a clash that plays out at sea, in courts, and in the lives of millions in Gaza. Yasemin Acar's testimony, whatever political reactions it provokes, has brought renewed focus on the human dimension of a blockade that has shaped the region's reality for nearly 2 decades. Her story, carried by international media, poses a question to the world: whether the delivery of food, water and medical supplies to a besieged population can ever be considered a threat to security. As the Flotilla members settle back into their lives, the memory of those days at sea and in detention remains vivid. Their words now join a long record of testimonies and investigations that trace the human costs of one of the world's most intractable conflicts. For the people of Gaza, the blockade still stands. For the activists of the Sumud Flotilla, the hope is that their experience will galvanize greater attention and action. And for international observers, the episode serves as yet another reminder that the crisis in Gaza is not only a story of borders and weapons, but also of hunger, dignity, and the contested meaning of humanitarian aid.
And we were not allowed to see our lawyers. We were put in front of a judge without a lawyer who told us that we came to Israel illegally, and we were not going to accept that because that's not true. We were going to Palestine, where Israel put a siege, an 18-year siege, and we were supposed to break that siege because it's against international law. And Israel is committing a genocide. Israel is using starvation as a weapon of war. And we saw just a fraction of what Palestinians go through. And the 11,000 prisoners go through, 500 of them children as young as 9 years old.